Today I'm going to teach you how to paint a fairly complex sky in watercolor. And I love this technique. This is something I could do over and over and over again, and it always seems to turn out a little bit different because I'm trying to tap into the spontaneous qualities of watercolor. If you're curious about what paints I use, what brushes I use, check out my supplies video. I put it in the description down below. Before I get started, I wanted to list a couple of my influences that I think paint skies really well. The first would be Joseph Bookvich. He's a watercolorist from Australia, and he's absolutely fantastic, and he's a big inspiration for today's painting. Another one would be Andy Evenson. He's fantastic at painting skies and just about anything. Another one that is excellent at skies is Sergei Tamarev. These three artists I think are all fantastic at painting skies, so if you want to get really inspired, I would suggest that you take a look at their work. Okay, I'm going to start off with some raw sienna. You don't need a lot. A little bit of alizarin crimson. And I'm using this to just kind of loosen the paper up a little bit. What this is going to do is create some soft edges when I go in to add more to the sky. And I'm going to leave a little bit of dry paper in the top left here, because that's where I want a harder edge when I make this sky. You'll see what I mean here in a minute. I'm going to take some ultramarine and cobalt and a little bit of cerulean. I'm going to load my brush up pretty good, and I'm trying to get texture here. I'm trying to get a little bit of the texture of the paper to show. And that's how you can get some of those nice broken edges. So one trick here is you got to move quick before this paper has time to dry. So I'm going to add some more blue here. And if things are starting to tighten up on you a little bit, spray the paper. We don't want this to dry yet. I want this to be wet. I'm going to do a lot of softening of this. One thing to remember about watercolor is it does fade off as it dries, so don't be afraid to go pretty dark here at the top of this painting. Trying to leave some of these interesting edges here. Don't want it to be too sharp, too boxy, or too much of a triangle or anything like that. Okay, I'm gonna get some more alizarin crimson, a little bit of raw sienna. I'm gonna start playing around in here a little bit. Looking for interesting ways that I can break this shape up. Okay, I'm gonna take a different brush, and this one I'm just kind of getting wet. And I'm gonna start to, actually I'll put a little bit of pigment on here. A little alizarin crimson and raw sienna. And I wanna, what I'm doing here, I'm just softening some of these edges. Use your water, soften some of these. Okay, there's some areas here where it's almost dry at this point. You can go in with some water and just get some interesting texture in some of these areas. Now I'm just kind of mixing all these colors together. So we're just kind of making some texture for some clouds in the distance. I want to take that little bit of pigment off of there. So you can kind of see we got some interesting things going on here. Before this dries, if you want to highlight some parts of the sky, take some thicker pigment. So again, I'm kind of mixing all three that I was using earlier. So maybe there's some areas we want to highlight a little bit. You get some darker you can use some of these darks to kind of direct your eye around the painting, bring out some of these highlights that I left that I kind of like. We don't have to overdo this here, just add a little bit of design to it. While this is wet and you're adding this thicker pigment, you get these soft edges in here. And that's one of the best parts about watercolor. These little things that you're not in complete control of, but it makes an interesting effect. So that's not bad. I mean, that's kind of interesting. We have a variety of edge. We have some hard edges, some soft edges. I don't really love this shape here. So sometimes you just destroy something and you hope that you kind of make it better than what it was. So I don't know if I'm making things better or worse. I just put a little bit of water in it, create some effects. But that's a lot of what this is experimenting and playing. And the more you do this, the more you'll kind of understand what it does, why it does it. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, sometimes when I'm doing skies, I'm just creating a sky to make a sky. If you want to kind of finish it off a little, get more of a sense of a sky, you can add something darker underneath it. So I'm just going to add some thicker pigment here. And I'm going to make kind of a seascape out of this. So what I'm doing there, I'm going right up against that wet edge with some thicker paint. And it creates this really beautiful, soft horizon. And I'll just kind of play with this a little bit. This isn't really what this video is about, but just kind of show you kind of what some of the possibilities are when you're working on your skies. A little bit of texture kind of brings that forward. Mixing in some cobalt turquoise here. Okay, so I'm just putting some thicker paint here in the foreground. Kind of makes the distance kind of drop back when you do that. We're just having fun. Okay, so that's not really the point of this painting. The point of the painting is the sky up here. So we have a variety of edge, and it's not bad. I hope you enjoyed that video. This technique I find challenging, especially early on when you're starting to paint. It's hard to know what's happening on the paper. And I think this technique really calls for you to be diligent in seeing how wet the paper is and understanding how much pigment you have on your brush, how much water you have on your brush, and what is that going to mean for the painting when I touch it to the paper. I hope you enjoyed it. Please stick around. There's more to come. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.